We always celebrate astronauts for their incredible courage and the amazing things they do. But have we ever really stopped to ask what that journey to space might mean for their children? Or, get this, even their grandchildren? Well, we're about to dive into a pretty groundbreaking study that looks at exactly that, the generational echo of spaceflight. I mean, that is a profound question, isn't it? As we seriously start planning to become a multiplanetary species, the answer could literally shape the future of humanity. For decades, we've studied how things like microgravity and radiation affect the human body, the basics. But there's this huge blind spot in our knowledge. What's the impact on reproductive health and on the kids of those who go to space? This isn't just some scientific curiosity either. It's a critical safety issue for the entire future of space exploration. So, to even start getting answers, scientists designed a truly one-of-a-kind experiment. They sent a very carefully selected crew on a mission to the International Space Station, not to build or explore, but to help us understand our own biology. So, let's meet our pioneers, a group of female mice. Yep, they were chosen to see how the unique and frankly harsh environment of space might affect a mammal's reproductive system and, most importantly, their future offspring. Now, 42 days might not sound like a lot to you and me, but for a mouse, that is a significant amount of time. To put it in perspective, it's comparable to about 8 months of a woman's reproductive life. So this was absolutely a relevant, long-duration mission. The process was, on paper, pretty straightforward, but actually pulling it off was incredibly complex. The mice launched, they spent their 42 days orbiting Earth, they returned safely, and only then were they mated with males who had never left the ground. The whole goal was to isolate the effects of the mother's spaceflight on her children. And of course, good science demands a control group. So while the flight group was up in space, their counterparts back on Earth lived in identical habitats. We're talking everything: the same temperature, the same CO2 levels, the same light schedule. The only major difference between them? Gravity. So, the big question: what happened to the children of these astronaut moms? Well, the results from this first generation, the F1s, gave us our first really fascinating clues. Okay, this is where the story gets really, really interesting. As it turns out, spaceflight didn't affect the male and female babies in the same way. Nope. The effects were completely different depending on their sex. First, let's talk about the daughters. The female pups from the moms who went to space were consistently heavier than the control group. And this wasn't just some baby fat either. This difference stuck with them right into adulthood. And they also had more overall body fat. Something about their mother's time in orbit actually altered their metabolism. But the sons were a whole different story. They didn't have any changes in weight. But their behavior? Whoa. In a standard test for anxiety, they spent a staggering 90% more time in the exposed, risky parts of a maze. It suggests their mother's journey might have programmed them to be less anxious, or maybe just bigger risk takers. So we have this really clear split. On one side, you have heavier, less active daughters. On the other, more adventurous sons. And just to add another layer of weirdness, while the sons had bigger calf muscles, both sexes had weaker muscle function overall. It's a really complex and totally unexpected outcome. But the scientists didn't stop there. They had to ask, what about the grandchildren? So let's move to the second generation, the F2s, because this is where the story takes a huge, dramatic turn. So initially, when they looked at the grandchildren of our spacefaring mice, they found, well, nothing. No big differences in weight or behavior or activity. It really looked like the effect had just vanished. This was the big question. Did the biological echo of that space mission just fade away completely? Or was there something else going on? Something hidden just beneath the surface? To find out, the researchers decided to introduce a new challenge. They put the grandkids on an 8-week diet that was high in fat and sugar, basically the mouse equivalent of a fast food binge. The idea was to see if a hidden vulnerability might pop up if they put the system under a bit of stress. And that's when the hidden legacy was revealed. That diet acted like a switch, exposing a vulnerability passed down from the astronaut grandmothers. Check out the male response. The spaceflight lineage gained more weight and fat-free mass. But the females from that same family line, they did the opposite. They failed to gain the lean mass they were supposed to. Their grandmother's trip to space had programmed a different metabolic response in them, one that only showed up when it was challenged. Even the study's authors called this find quite remarkable. You know, when scientists use language like that, it's a big deal. They had found clear evidence of an effect that skipped an entire generation, just lying dormant, waiting for a trigger. So, what on earth does a mouse study have to do with the future of humans in space? Well, as it turns out, everything. What we're seeing here is a phenomenon called transgenerational inheritance. It's the idea that a major environmental stressor, in this case spaceflight, can leave an imprint on the health of future generations, even on the ones who were never directly exposed to it themselves. So the real key takeaway is this. The 42 days those mice spent in orbit didn't just end when they landed. That mission sent a biological ripple 2 generations into the future, creating a hidden weakness that just waited for the right trigger to reveal itself. Let's just put it all together. We've now seen that a mother's journey to space can have direct health consequences for her children, and with very different results for sons versus daughters. And maybe most importantly, we know a hidden vulnerability can be passed down to her grandchildren. This one study proves why this research is absolutely vital as we plan for humanity's future beyond this planet. This single study just opens up a whole universe of new questions. It's not just about keeping astronauts safe on their missions anymore. It's about protecting the health of their families, their descendants. It leaves us with a truly critical challenge. As we reach for the stars, how do we make sure we're protecting the very future of humanity?